we'll go ahead and kick this topic off. So today's presentation, using LLM as a judge, helpful or harmful. I think, again, as I mentioned, a pretty timely topic, and we're really excited to have Micaela, our ML Evangelist, who will be giving the presentation today and answering questions. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Micaela. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Nate. Hi, everyone. As Nate mentioned, my name is Micaela. I am the ML Evangelist here at Human Signal, which I like to describe as a fancy way of saying that I used to be a practicing data scientist and now I talk a lot about data science. My experience is mostly in NLP, so I think that LLM as a judge is a really important topic and a very relevant topic as well. As Nate mentioned, feel free to throw your questions or your commentary in the chat or the Q&A widget. I'll be monitoring those as we go. I would love to take your questions as we get started here. So without further ado, using LLM as a judge, helpful or harmful? So you have some data, presumably. In this case, we're looking at shapes and colors, and we're sorting them by shapes and colors. But you have some data in your world that is you're trying to organize in some way. And the first question you need to figure out is it quality data? Is the output of your model really doing what you think it's doing? Are your annotators really doing what you think they're doing? Is the data really what you think it is? And more importantly, how do you know? How can we have confidence in the outputs of the models that we're going to rely on to do our day-to-day business functions and our important customer interactions? The first way that we can do this is with traditional human annotation. This is a screenshot from our platform using just a classic IMDb classification. So movie reviews, are they positive, negative, or neutral? Um, you might be familiar with this layout. You might not be familiar with this layout. That's okay. We'll go through it in a little while. But essentially, you're going to have a human go through and make these annotations themselves. And that can be really great. Human data allows us to get real metrics like precision, recall, and F1, where we can take a ground truth data from a human and calculate how often the model got it right, how often the model got it wrong, and how many, percentage of items that are relevant that are retrieved, and how many relevant items are retrieved in all. Those are your precision and recall metrics. And those can be really useful for helping us figure out how well our model is actually performing. But the problem is that humans are expensive and annotation takes time. So what do we do about that? One increasingly popular option is to use LLM as a judge, where we ask an LLM to predict the outputs of our model or judge the outputs of our model. So given the output of a model, is this correct? Is this incorrect? And let a model do the human work. The problem is that sometimes it ends up a little bit like this, where you sort of have one LLM judging itself or judging another LLM or model, and it's kind of unclear who's doing what and who has expertise in what section. And things can get a little bit confusing when using LLM as a judge, whether you're using it to judge the output of an LLM or the output of another model. And so the question becomes, why would you bother doing this in the first place? There are some pros to LLM as a judge. I love this image. I think it's very funny. Um, in some ways, LLM as a judge is faster and cheaper than humans, where a human might need to spend 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes even annotating a single sample. By the time they read all of the text, make their judgments, an LLM can process this in seconds or less than that. They're also often cheaper. We like to pay humans by the time that they spend, and we need to pay them fairly. LLMs are obviously much cheaper than that in many ways. They can also handle cases where a rule-based approach for evaluation wouldn't work. So, unlike humans, LLM as a judge cannot think critically. They are a model after all. But we have some other rule-based evaluation metrics, things like regex, that LLM as a judge can handle things that are broader than what regex or another system like that could handle. They're also scalable and explainable, where it might cost, exponentially increasing amounts of time or money to have humans do this work. LLM as a judge is scalable, right? We can use more than one LLM. We can parallelize things. There's lots of coding type solutions we can use. And LLMs can often explain their logic, right? We can ask them to provide an explanation, and we can then see what caused the output that we got, which is often more explainable than other types of modeling might be, other types of evaluation might be, and even than humans if we're not asking our humans to include judgment calls in their work. But there are some cons as well to LLM as a judge. The first is that there's many types of bias that can make its way into LLM as a judge. The first is position bias, where if you're asking an LLM to choose between multiple things, let's say you're asking it to choose between multiple different kinds of outputs, uh, position bias says the first thing in that list is always right because it's the first thing. We know that's not always true. The second thing is verbosity bias, where the longest thing in the list is correct, the wordiest response. We also know that might not be true, especially if we're trying to optimize for conversational tokens or things like that. And the final bias here is self-enhancement bias, where the LLM is going to look for what most closely resembles its own output, and it will choose that as the best thing, which we often don't want it to do. Some of these biases are more impactful than others depending on your use case. So if you're doing things like output evaluation or summarization, verbosity bias, self-enhancement bias might come into play here. If you're just trying to evaluate the output of a classification model, you might be looking at position bias more than the other two. But you need to be aware of how all of these different types of biases are impacting your model, and more importantly, how your LLM, the judge, is judging the output of your model. There are also some other problems with LLM as a judge that I feel are important to discuss here. The first is we don't really know how well they mimic humans. If we're just using LLM as a judge off the bat with no human annotated ground truth to begin with, we don't know if the LLM judgment and a human judgment are going to match up necessarily. And we don't know in that case how well the model is really doing, right? When you use LLM as a judge, you now almost have two models that you have to evaluate, whatever your base model is that you're trying to evaluate. And you need to also be evaluating the judge itself. Similarly, the LLM as a judge might not have the context for your needs. So let's say you have a model that's doing some sort of classification task or summarization task on proprietary data, things like customer logs, medical records, catalogs, whatever it might be. If that data is not public, it's not part of the LLM's training. And if the LLM doesn't have it as part of its training data, it might not be able to execute on your task on your data as well as you want it to. So it's really important that we evaluate the outputs of LLM as a judge to make sure that we can have trust not only in the model that we're using the judge to evaluate, but also in the LLM as a judge itself. So the question becomes, how do we evaluate LLM as a judge or LLMs kind of in general? And I would propose a set of three different things here that can all be used in combination with each other to help us really have faith and trust in the models that we're using. So, the first sort of set of this is this human created test set. This is going to be your very standard, very basic human created test set where you ask a human to go in and annotate your data for you. You'll probably give very clear instructions. You're going to want to have a training process. It is a little bit more costly. It does take a little bit more time, but it allows us to compare our LLM as a judge with our human raters. Um, this really gives us confidence that the LLM as a judge is doing what we want it to do. You don't want to treat your LLM as a judge as a black box. If you do, you're going to end up with results that don't necessarily mean anything and might not help you at all in the first place. This process can also help us aid in prompt tuning. When you have a ground truth set, you can make sure that you are checking your prompts against this ground truth set to make sure that you're consistently improving your prompt. You can check your accuracy against your ground truth. And this is all available as well in prompts through Label Studio, which is an enterprise and starter cloud feature, which we'll be happy to talk more about later. And these human created test sets can also help us understand where our models are doing well and where they can improve. There's no real replacement for getting down and dirty with your own data. It's really important that you have a hands-on experience, that you know what your data looks like and where it is and what is in it, so that we can help tune our models to the best of our abilities. And this might include prompt tuning. If you're training your own model, this might be data augmentation. There's many techniques here that we can do to improve our models and also understand where they're doing well. The second approach is to check for multiple types of correctness. So this is especially important when you're using LLM as a judge or other LLM-based modeling techniques, because LLM as a judge is generative. So there's going to be a different answer every time, most likely, depending on how your model temperature is set. And these answers can be correct in more than one way. So when you're looking for what correct means, you want to make sure that you're looking for more than just accuracy. You want to be looking for relevancy and clarity and faithfulness. and all kinds of other different metrics that you might want to use. So this image here is a screenshot from our Label Studio template for RAG evaluation. I understand that RAG is not quite an LLM, but it should give you sort of a sense of what we mean by looking into these different types of correctness. So here we have the response populated by a model, and we're looking at these RAGAS metrics, which are sort of proxy metrics for faithfulness, relevancy. We also have textual evaluation, but you'll want to make sure that you're looking for correctness in more than one way so you can evaluate on more than one axis. I did see a hand up briefly. If that was an accident, that's fine. If not, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A panel or in the chat, and I would be happy to answer them and have whatever conversations are on your mind. Um, so that's checking for multiple types of correctness there. Uh, and finally, in this approach, we have the LLM as a jury approach. LLM as a jury, the idea here is that two heads or many heads are better than one. This was coined by Varga et al. In their 2024 paper, Replacing Judges with Juries, Evaluating LLM Generations with a Panel of Diverse Models. And the idea here is that because these models are generative, they're going to provide a slightly different answer every time. Um, and that different evaluation judges, so in this case, they have Haiku and Mistral and ChatGPT and all manner of others, are going to perform differently than each other. So on this x-axis here, we have the judge method. And on this y-axis here, we have the change in accuracy, where 0 is the human judgments. And we can see that the evaluation judge, depending on the type of model that we're evaluating, might be different or closer to human accuracy. And the idea here is that if we average them, so these little pink diamonds, we're going to get closer to a human judgment than if we didn't. So we can almost have the LLM as a judge. We can have multiple judges or the same model multiple times provide answers in a way that will help us get sort of a more holistic understanding of what's actually going on here. And this can be a great way if you're doing summaries or classifications to sort of compare multiple outputs and get one overarching, more likely to be correct by human standards approach. So at the end of the day here, these challenges are inherent in all forms of AI model evaluation, not just with LLM as a judge. But on the one side of the spectrum, we have a fully manual approach, which is where you have just your humans doing all of your labeling by hand. It's the gold standard for accuracy. You can train your annotators, you can work with them, you can talk to them about their logic. Humans can think critically. But it is the most expensive option because we have to pay humans for their time, and also these things take time. On the other side of the spectrum, we have a fully automated approach, which would be your full LLM as a judge approach, which is very efficient, right? Modeling takes a lot less time, prompt tuning takes a lot less time than training annotators does. So it's efficient, but it is often less reliable than humans because models are still models and models are not perfect. So the best solution that we propose here is a hybrid approach that effectively balances cost with reliability. So you want to have a case where you have a human either providing a gold standard that you can check your LLM as judge against, or a human using these LLM generated judgments as a baseline for their own evaluation. This is the part where I am obligated to give you a sales pitch. So please bear with me. But Label Studio, which is available at labelstud.io, which is a great name for, it's very punny, it's very great, but it's terrible for marketing, is an open source data labeling platform. If you're here, I'm sure you know all about it, that allows you to do just that. And in fact, there are many ways that you can do LLM as a judge right inside of Label Studio. If you're on the open source platform, this is going to look like the ML backend for you. You can tune into some of our other webinars or check out our YouTube channel for more information on the ML backend, or I'm happy to answer questions about it here in a minute. On our starter cloud and enterprise levels, we have prompts, which also has more information about on our YouTube channel and our documentation and at humansignal.com. Basically, prompts allows you to use your ground truth data that you've already provided in Label Studio that you've already created, or any other data you upload to Label Studio, and do prompts, leverage prompts and an LLM that you provide that we integrate with to directly pre-label your data. This allows you to quickly and easily evaluate the output of your LLM as a judge or your LLM judgments, and also make sure that your model is behaving exactly the way you think it is. in exactly the situations you think it is behaving. Um, so that is the quick and dirty version of whether LLM as a judge is hurtful or harmful. Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you at the end of the day. It's really going to come down to your use case and your models and what your goals are. But I would say that in general, LLM as a judge can be very, very helpful when used appropriately. They're not a silver bullet, they're not the end all be all of accuracy, but they're certainly a great way to help you speed up your time to insights and your time to labeling. So with that, I'd like to just take a second to thank the sources that I used to create this presentation. The LM as a Judge with MT Bench and Chatbot Arena paper, as well as the Varga et al. 2024 paper on LM as a jury. I'm happy to share these slides with you. If you have further questions, you can just shoot me an email at micaela@humansignal.com. And at this point, I would love to take any questions that you have, discuss anything that came up that you want to dive deeper into. Tangents are totally okay, so I'll give you a second to drop questions in the chat or the Q&A section. I don't see any at the moment. Nate, I don't know if you have anything to add while we wait and see if anyone has any questions.
I'm taking through, we did get some questions submitted through the form. It looks like we actually have some that are hitting the Q&A widget right now, but I'll pull some of these ones off of the registration form and send them to you as well.
Perfect, thank you. Do you see any good in prompt tuning a judge model? Absolutely. Um, so in Label Studio prompts, which I'm happy to demo, or you can check out our YouTube channel or our humansignal.com page. Um, you can definitely tune a judge model. You want to make sure that your prompt is clearly and easily explaining what your goals are in your judgments. You're going to want to make sure that you articulate these in a way that is going to be understandable to the LLM. And I think that there is value in playing with how you phrase that. We know that LLMs are better at following some instructions than others, formatted in some ways than others. Um, and I think tuning that evaluation prompt can help you get better results for sure. A platform like Label Studio, when you use prompts alongside your ground truth judgments, will give you real accuracy metrics about how well that those different prompts are doing that might be able to help you pick the best version of your prompt for tuning your judge model. That was a great question, and let me know if I can answer more. Nicole, can you please demo how to use LLM as a judge within the Human Signal platform? Absolutely, I can. I'm going to take a few other questions first and then come back to this one. So give me just a second there. Let's see. Have I tried soft prompt tuning using a vector instead of manually tuning? I have not tried that. That sounds like a great technique. I'm not exactly sure how it would work in prompts in Label Studio, but it's definitely worth trying. Um, let's see, another question. Um, how can we align the LLM evaluations to human experts on a summarization task in the point-wise evaluation case? Is it reliable? Can the model really understand a scoring rubric? From my experiments, I've seen a huge positive bias on a 1 to 5 scale. The models that I've tried were scoring most samples as 3, 4, or 5 incorrectly. That's a great question, too. So aligning your LLM evaluations to a summarization task can be really challenging. And this is largely due to the generative nature of LLMs and the open text nature of summarization. Um, is it reliable? I think it depends how you do it. I find in my experience that extracting key points, looking for similarity vectors, things like that can really help, but are not necessarily always accurate. As far as a scoring rubric is concerned, this is where prompt tuning is going to come in. So in my experience, the LLM often struggles with a rubric. We've been playing with a couple of cases of OpenAI's Health Bench, which is a rubric-based evaluation model for specifically medical texts. More on that coming soon. But and essentially, when we ask it to judge based on a rubric, we ask it to give points based on every element. And we had to do some prompt tuning there to really get it to think through each element on its own. As far as if you wanted to say, here's my summary and here are all the things I'm looking for in my summary, did it do that? I think it really comes down to prompt tuning and how you structure those things. Because you're right, that there is a huge positive bias, and a lot of that comes from the LLM that you might be using. Another question here. Um, Considering the intent and need to correct model outputs after evaluating them on specific tasks, I would like to understand what's human signal position is in relation to prompt and context engineering versus fine-tuning the model weights. I have to say that fine-tuning looks like a lot like cutting an apple with a chainsaw, and we can't really avoid the black box problem. That's a really great point as well. So human signal, I don't know if we have a position per se, but we do definitely allow you to both evaluate your own fine-tuned models and work on context engineering in the same platform. So essentially what you can do is you can use prompts on whatever LLM you'd like to use to create judgments against your data, summaries, classifications, NLP, whatever you have. And then you can have a human go back in and edit those responses, change those responses, do whatever you need to do there. Um, and you can use that in a couple of ways. The first is that you could use it to fine tune a model, though you're right, might be a little bit like cutting an apple with a chainsaw. You can also use those to compare against other LLMs or different versions of your prompt that might be helpful for fine tuning. I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure it did. How can I use LLM as a judge for evaluating speech-to-text model over its ability to transliteration in Label Studio? That's a great question. I don't know that our current implementation works with audio files in prompts exactly, but you could write an ML backend to do this. So essentially what you would want to do is write an ML backend, more on that on our YouTube channel and also in our on our website, and basically take in the audio, ask the LLM to transcribe it itself, and then you could use that as a pre-label on your human judgments. I don't know who asked this question, but if you wanted to reach out to me at Micaela@humansignal.com, I'd be more than happy to have this discussion with you in a more personal context. Um, what other questions do we have here? Let's see. How to evaluate generative output with the balance between performance and cost? Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead right now and switch on to my, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second while I pull up my Label Studio instance here. And then I'm going to show you what prompts looks like so that we can get a better understanding together of how to use this software. Bookers approach have a common work better so they use parallels multiple contexts. Uh, yeah. So while I pull this up, we got another question uh, talking about breaking accuracy down with other metrics like clarity or faithfulness, but these seem like quite subjective metrics. How do we measure the objectiveness of LLM as a judge? That's a great question too. Um, so clarity and faithfulness work best. Clarity is absolutely an objective metric. That sort of gets at the human aspect of this. If you want to know how well a human is going to like one answer versus another, I think that clarity is very helpful there. Faithfulness, as described by Ragus, is a metric that compares an output of a model with the documents it used to generate that output. So that's a little bit RAG specific, where RAG is the system, as many of you know, where we connect a knowledge base to our LLM. I think ensuring the objectiveness of LLM as a judge is really going to come down to a good test set. This is where you're going to want to have a human curated set of correct answers that we can make sure the LLM is hitting the marks on, that we can really test for objectiveness so that we can have confidence in our overarching model. I'm just pulling up prompts for 1 second. Let me look for a good example here. This looks like a pretty solid example. Let me just make sure that we're looking at the right thing here. Perfect. So let me go ahead and share my screen again. Can everyone see that? I'm going to assume yes, unless I hear otherwise. And let me just pull up my chat window one more time. There we go. So in this case, this is our prompts window. This is available in Label Studio, Starter Cloud, and Enterprise. You associate your prompt with a project, so it already knows what data you have and what your fields are that you're looking for. In this case, we're just doing a simple named entity recognition task, so we're asking the LM to extract all of the entities for a given text. Here we have a pretty basic prompt that says, please extract all entities from the given text. We provide the text, and then for each entity, we ask it to provide some details. Here you can click between any of the models that you might have. We have a bunch of Vertex AI, Azure AI, custom models, whatever you might have, wherever they might be hosted. As long as they're OpenAI compatible, you can use them here. We can also save our prompt versions as versions with different names, different descriptions, so we can do fine tuning of prompts or prompt tuning, and also so we can compare the accuracy judgments. In this window over here, you can see that we're looking at our sample tasks. This label is the prediction, so you can see that we've already run this prediction. But we can also go ahead and click on our ground truth. So if in this project, if in the project that we have, you have any ground truth metrics or any ground truth data provided, you can go ahead and select the ground truth data to be your candidate set here. Here we only have two. If we were to click into these tasks, you would see that we have all manner of different predictions up here. But essentially, we have this gold standard from Amy that has some extractions here. When we go ahead and we run this method, this prompt, this takes a minute, and the demo guides have not been working in my favor today, so here's hoping that they are. Here we go. We now get the output of the model. And we get to see it next to our gold standard data. We also still get to see the total cost, the total tokens, and this score. This score is going to mimic the accuracy scores, or the agreement scores rather, that you get in Label Studio Enterprise and Starter Cloud. So whatever your project is configured to use for agreement, essentially what happens is it will treat the prediction from the LLM as an annotation and look for the agreement between the ground truth and the prediction. And you can see here that there's 20% overlap in this first example, 0% overlap in the second example, giving us a micro average of 0.13. We can see that's made up of precision and recall. We have an overall accuracy. We can also expand this to see for each of our labels, how many labels did we have predicted in here. And then these predictions will show up. This is extract entity from text with detailed output specification. If we click into this task now, we can see from 1 minute ago, we have this test NER with the name of our prompt, and we can see exactly what was predicted. We can also compare it against other predictions or other evaluations. And that's more or less how LLM as a judge evaluation will work in Label Studio today. My favorite thing about this part of the program is that it allows for really good human oversight. And you can see now that we have a new accuracy score here, 0.1. We can compare it to the first version of the prompt, which just asks to extract all entities from the text. We could write new versions of the prompt. We can enhance our prompt, all kinds of things here that can help you make better use of LLM-as-a-Judge and help you speed up your time to labeling and to insight from your data. Nicole, I hope that answers your question, and as well as the other questions about using LLM as a judge. Let's see what other questions we have here. Feel free to drop more questions into the chat or into the Q&A section as you have them. Let's see. I do feel that prompt optimization, with or without AI assist, is already programmatic enough. What would you say about fuzzily expanding these evals towards an entire data set while disallowing human oversight? Sounds like I totally agree. For those of you who, sorry, I mumbled a little bit. Basically, the question is asking, can we expand evaluations towards an entire data set without allowing for human oversight? I would say that there's always needs to be some level of human oversight in this, but I think a system like prompts from Label Studio really gives you an ability to be confident in your LLM as a judge. LLM as a judge and LLMs in general are notoriously bad at predicting their own confidence. They might be very, very confident in very wrong answers, and so we can't always rely on those to give us good candidates for human oversight. But I think once you have a LLM as a judge prompt that you're confident in, you can definitely go ahead and sort of run it on its own and ask humans to evaluate only those answers that are maybe marked as one category or another by an LLM. Maybe you random sample from that to have some human oversight. But I think as you sort of move through the process of starting LLM as a judge, training LLM as a judge prompts, and then executing your LLM as a judge, you can sort of fine tune how much human oversight you get in those processes, depending on what exactly you're doing and how it works. Something else I would say from a responsible AI perspective is that you need to think about what is the cost of being wrong. So let's say you have an LLM as a judge model or an LLM in any case that's just classifying whether an image is a cat or a dog, let's say for like a pet adoption site. The cost of being wrong isn't necessarily huge. It might be a little weird. You might have a cat that should be on the dog page or vice versa, but it might not be the end of the world if you're wrong. On the other hand, if you're working in a medical context or in something that is really high stakes, maybe financial contexts, the cost of being wrong might be really, really high. You might be working with someone's healthcare, someone's medical records. And in those cases, it might be even more important to have human oversight. So I think that it's important that we sort of let our humans do what humans are good at and give them the AI-enabled tools to make their jobs as easy as possible so they can do what they're good at and not have to waste their time doing other things. Um, you are so welcome, anonymous attendee. Feel free again to email me if you want to follow up on any of these questions. We have time for a few more. Can an LLM be used as a determinate judge without humans in the loop and guardrails? Um, I would say no at the current stage. I think given how LLMs perform today, on some very straightforward tasks, they might be able to perform well without human oversight and guardrails, but you wouldn't know that without testing your system first. And I think testing the system inherently involves humans in the loop and guardrails. And I think as you get into more and more subjective cases with longer and longer criteria or rubrics or explanations, the amount of oversight that you need on those models increases exponentially. Again, it definitely depends on your use case and what you're doing. But I think as we stand today, you definitely still need to put oversight onto those models and into those systems. Um, let's see, a few more questions here. Keep them coming. I love this part. What are the key benefits of using LLM as a judge compared to traditional model evaluation methods? That's a great question. I think LLM as a judge really speeds up our time to insight. So in traditional model evaluation methods, you need to have a fully curated human data set to compare against, a test set perhaps where you hold out from training and then continue on the evaluation after the fact. LLM as a judge helps us speed up the amount of time it takes to curate that humans created test set. They're also a little bit more flexible and can provide a little bit more information. So let's say you don't have access to a huge human annotator database. Maybe you don't have the people power or the man or the hours to really do that. LLM as a judge can really help you in those cases. Um, how can LLM as a judge be integrated into existing model evaluation workflows to increase their efficiency? Also a great question. With Label Studio, you can use these LLM as a judge evaluations or LLM evaluations in general as a starting point for your humans. So they can, if you click into these tasks here, you can see that you can't see it right now, but if I were to add an annotation um, from scratch at the beginning here, they would pre-populate with some of the outputs of these models such that I just only had to change them or edit them instead of having to start from scratch. This can really save your humans a lot of time. You can also use LLM as a judge to sort of route your judgments through your workflow as it exists today. So maybe you don't need a human to provide oversight on every single example, but you might be able to use LLM as a judge to help your humans focus in on the tasks that need the most oversight. Um, as far as best practices and strategies for effectively scaling model output and evaluation for using LLM as a judge, I think that it really depends on your use case and what your framework looks like. But if you wanted to shoot me an email, I would be more than happy to discuss this based on your use case. Another question here. I'm just gonna take a quick sip of my drink. The general consensus states that pointwise evaluation is less mature than pairwise comparison. Do you think that using cheap text gen models, we could generate synthetic candidates to compare against and get a better evaluation overall? Absolutely. I think that using LLMs to create synthetic data could be really helpful. We actually have a post coming out in a week or two about the world of synthetic data and why it can be helpful and also why it can be harmful. Uh, the more that we use synthetic data, the less reliable our models become in working with real human generated data. Um, but I do think that creating synthetic candidates to compare against will help you get better over evaluation overall. But again, it depends on your use case and what exactly you're trying to do there. Um, I hope that answered your question. Uh, I think that's all of them. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Oh, I see another one. Um, You propose an approach for an automatic process to realize the drift of LLM as a judge regarding its results. That's a great question. Just like with any other model, you need to be aware of drift in your judge model, as though you would be aware of drift in your base model as well. And I'm not sure that there's a supplement for human created ground truth here. You'd want to, in my head, the way I'm thinking of it right now, you'd want to have some sort of a standard test set that you can use that has real judgments, that you can get hard metrics, so that you can compare and see how your LM as a judge model might be changing or drifting over time. If it starts to give you one type of answer and a few weeks later is giving you a whole new type of answer on the same question, that can be an indicator that your model is drifting. Um, Similarly, you might be able to use automatic metrics like Ragus's faithfulness, accuracy, things like that to like sort of detect that drift. But I think it's still a very new space. And I'm not sure right now there's really a strong opposition, a strong candidate for doing this other than human in the loop right now. And I also think that it's important that we maintain human oversight on these models and that we understand where they're working well and where they need to be improved. Any other questions? You are very welcome. Any other questions? All right, Nate, I'm going to hand it back to you to close us out.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Michaela. Thanks everybody for the great questions that you asked, and hopefully this was helpful to you. Uh, just want to again reiterate, we this was recorded. We'll be posting it to our YouTube channel. We'll also send you an email with a link to the video, so you'll have access to that. And yeah, in the meantime, hope everybody has a great rest of the day. And thanks, Michaela, for sharing your knowledge with us.
Have a good day, everyone.
We'll see y'all.